Hey everybody, Michael Snyder, Pacific Northwest Weather Watch. Today is February 29th, and right now we're looking at the infrared satellite imagery. Look at all this cold air out over the Gulf of Alaska, rolling back into the Pacific Northwest. Frontal system is draped across Alberta, BC, Washington, Oregon, down into California. We have a thunderstorm chance here for the next few days. We got big mountain snows incoming and big wave action on the coastline, and we have that lower elevation snowfall potential as well. We're going to dive into some of those details as we go through the video this morning. Taking a look at the visible, you can see the Doppler radar overlay and all the showers now starting. Can't rule out a thunderstorm here for the next few days. So eyes on the sky. Watch out for those dark clouds rolling in here. And taking a look at the last 36 hours, some impressive precipitation totals. A lot of this in the form of snow, again, across the higher terrain. You can see that rain shadow there across from the San Juans. And you can see 1.2 inches for Seattle, close to 3 for Olympia. Big amounts across the Olympics and Southwest Washington, the Oregon coastal range, Cascades, and all the way down through Southwest Oregon. And still bringing some precipitation out into eastern Oregon, but not much yet. And of course, you're not going to get as much as areas west of the mountains are for sure. But we're going to be adding to these totals here the next few days as well. We got a lot of that cold air is still going to be producing these showers and additional precipitation amounts. Mountain snowfall today. This goes for the Cascades of Washington, Oregon, about 1,500 feet. So nice low snow levels, continuing to build that snowpack across our higher terrain. And we're going to drop these snow levels even more as we go on into Friday and Saturday morning. And just pointing out for Southwest Oregon here, some pretty dynamic storms still rolling in, and the snow levels are going to be dropping rapidly if you're going back and forth on I-5 across southern Oregon. Siskiyou Summit heads up, very difficult winter driving conditions. So let's take a look at what's happening just off the surface at 2,500 feet. And you can see this cold air mass with that frontal system just absolutely marching across Pacific Northwest. And we bring in this very cold air aloft. This is right off the surface. Even though we're going to have southerly winds at the surface for a lot of areas, the air aloft is so cold, we do have the potential for some lower elevation snowfall. And I'll show you more on that here in a moment. But look at that very cold air aloft right over the region. So right above us here, we're below freezing. And the precipitation, once it's actively ongoing, there can be pulling some of that cold air down with it. Now, taking a look at the frontal system here, we're looking at the North American model versus the high resolution model here on the right. Frontal system we've been talking about, and of course that cold air and thunderstorm threat as we go through today, through tomorrow, and that's going to continue on and through Saturday, just round and round after shower. So eyes on the sky. Watch out for those small hail and snow pellet showers out there also, and even a little bit of lower elevation snowfall. So mean sea level pressure, look at the North American model here on the left. I wanted to show you this. This little feature has been showing up in some of the model runs here, and that would bring some locally windy conditions to the coast as we go through Friday evening and Friday night into Saturday morning. The high resolution model here on the right does not show that too much, however. Now, if we go ahead and look at the North American model versus the Canadian high resolution, put this through the motions here really quick, and you can see it does show that low pressure center there. So we got to watch that one for some pretty gusty winds right along the coastline. Let's see if the European shows it. This one's hot off the presses. I waited to do this video so we could look at this data. Cold air mass over the top of us, and it does show it there, as you see, as we go through Friday evening, nighttime, and Saturday morning here. So we got to watch out for those locally windy conditions on the coastline. And this is just kind of a hint at what may happen. Look at the North American model here on the left, and you can see some of those winds come up and mainly get Washington coast there. But look at the Canadian. It actually shows it hitting more close to Seaside and Astoria and some of Southwest Washington there. So we'll watch that one again tomorrow morning as well. So Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, it continues to show some of the snow piling up. So if it does snow, a lot of the places where it does snow, it's more likely to stick, of course, on the grass or wood surfaces or rooftops, for example, versus on the cement. The temperatures are going to be extremely marginal. It's going to be hard to get them much below freezing at all. So the roadways may be okay, especially if you're out there in a place where they can be treated. But some areas, like even the coastal areas, could be getting some measurable snowfall, some of the Kitsap Peninsula. And of course, you're not going to need much elevation to really get some snowfall accumulation out of this as well. So if we look at Astoria, keeps showing some of these snowfall totals out there on the coastal areas. And there's a lot of cold air alofts. When the precipitation is ongoing, you could bring those temperatures down towards the freezing mark as it's falling. Once the precipitation stops, you're going to rise back above freezing, but it still can have some impacts. It doesn't take much on the roadways to give some big impacts here and some slick conditions. And look at this, Gold Beach Municipal Airport on the Oregon coast. It continues to show this with some pretty big precipitation totals and so much cold air aloft. I don't know if it's fooling in the models here. I don't know, but it could be bringing out a couple inches of snowfall, especially on anything that is not cement. But you even can't rule it out in some of the cement out there also. Now, I brought up the National Blend of Models here, and this is a daily 2-meter minimum temperature. This is for Friday. Actually, let me back this up here so we can see for today. Okay, so this is actually... Can I look back towards Thursday? It is not letting me. Okay, we'll just do Friday then. So you can see these marginal temperatures here are getting down towards the freezing mark here. And when the precipitation's falling, you could even bring them down a degree or two colder. So it's a very marginal event. You can see some of the Kitsap Peninsula also showing up at around 32 degrees. So if we go through Saturday morning, again, those marginal temperatures, such a tough forecast because we have southerly winds at the surface, which really makes it tough to stick precipitation onto the roadway areas, but it still may happen for a brief time, so it could cause some impacts. And as we go on through Sunday here, we're going to get some chillier air in here, and it kind of shows this dropping down. This might be because of some clearing or whatnot as well. We'll revisit this for Sunday coming up over the next couple of days. But I want to show you the European. This is, again, hot off the presses, snow depth in inches. This is much more reliable than looking at a 10-to-1 or a Kuchera snow ratio in these marginal events. So if I put this into motion, you'll see how this kind of creeps towards the Washington coastline as we go through Friday morning. You could be getting a couple inches on the immediate coastline out there. Highway 101 could be kind of under the gun here. And you could even see some accumulation down the Oregon coast with all this cold air aloft. This low pressure systems out here is just fed from the Arctic air coming off the coast of British Columbia as we go on in towards the weekend and towards next week. And you can even see it teases out some accumulating snowfalls even down into the SeaTac area there as well. So, we will be revisiting this again tomorrow morning, but it's something to keep an eye on because when you see the snow falling, it can look pretty intimidating out there. And if it starts to stick on the cement, even for a brief period of time, it can cause some big impacts. And as we scroll out towards Sunday morning, look at some of the coastal areas. The European wants to try to tease out some accumulating snowfall there. And of course, the higher terrain of the coastal range, the Olympic Mountains, Vancouver Island, and the foothills of Washington and Oregon, the snow levels are going to be quite low upcoming here. So let's look at the North American model and look at accumulated positive snow depth change. Not quite as bullish as what the European was showing, but it does show that hint for some of the coastal areas here and maybe a little bit of snowfall for the Willamette Valley and the Puget Sound. At least you might see some flakes flying, but the snow levels will be pretty low. Then we scroll through Saturday morning also. So the North American model, not too hot on the lower elevation snowfall, but watch what the HERS shows here. This only goes out 48 hours also. Now, if we scroll on through here, look as we go on in through, this is tonight actually, through tonight into tomorrow morning. It shows some of that accumulating snowfall in the I-5 corridor there, maybe some of the Kitsap Peninsula, and then watch as we go on out into Friday night. It shows that accumulating snowfall very close to Highway 101. Some of the Oregon coast could be getting some as well, and yeah, even shows some towards the Seattle area as well. So yeah, the very marginal event. These are so tricky, and it shows some accumulating snow for the Willamette Valley, but if nothing else, the snow levels are going to be quite low into some of the foothill areas for the Cascades and the coastal range, Olympic Mountains, Vancouver Island, BC as well, and some of that eastern Washington. And it doesn't show too much here for eastern Washington right now, but eastern Oregon is what I meant to say earlier. And now this is, again, I mentioned this a little bit yesterday. This is why you throw these models out. You can see when you're looking at these global models, these are not high resolution models, so they really have a tough time with their terrain features. So this tends to bleed out into lower elevations. And you already know you're not going to get, a foot of snow down into Salem or Eugene or anything like that. And you're not going to get 19 inches of snow or 35 inches of snow on the coast there, on the Oregon coast, or 18 inches at La Push or Quileute out there as well. So you can kind of see why these maps really shouldn't be shown, and yet people continue to show them, and it kind of really can mislead the public out here. So don't pay attention to these 10-to-1 or even the Kuchera ratio snow models on these global models, even the European and the GFS. They're just not reliable. Now, why is this all happening? Let's take a look at the upper levels of the atmosphere. 500 millibars, 18,000 feet, thus polar lobe out over the Gulf of Alaska as we speak. The GFS is here on the right. Pretty good model agreement. I mean, you can see it clearly moving down from northwest to southeast, parking itself right off the coastline here. So this is why it's such a tough forecast, because the Arctic air is going to be pouring off of BC here and feeding this low pressure center and this very cold air aloft. When it does precipitate, it's going to try to drag those snow levels down to some of the areas here. And then you can kind of see it propagate a little bit closer as we go through Sunday morning. So we really have to watch Sunday morning as well for some lower elevation snowfall as this polar lobe kind of hangs with us all the way on in through Monday into Tuesday morning at this time period here. And maybe another system approaching the west coast as we go on in through next week. And this kind of shows you here 850 millibars. This is at 5,000 feet, streamlines and temperature anomalies. So you can see currently why we have all that cold air cumulus out over the Pacific Ocean, streaming back into the Pacific Northwest. And then you can kind of see this low pressure center tumbling down the coastline here. And you can see the Arctic air, look at that, feeding it off of southeast Alaska and British Columbia. This very cold Arctic air across central and northern BC, the Yukon Northwest Territories, is pouring out over the ocean and is trying to fast track that back in here. That's why it makes those low elevation snow levels so tricky to forecast. And with the upper level low like that and continuing to produce precipitation and, dragging those colder temperatures down towards the surface, it's going to be a very difficult forecast. And you cannot rule out surprise snowfall accumulations even into some of the lower elevations. You can see that Arctic air also trying to sag south here into BC. It doesn't look like it makes too much headway right across the immediate southwest BC, but it is spilling out over some of the west coast here and towards Vancouver Island, back out over the ocean and back into the Pacific Northwest. So that's why this cold upper level low is so cold and why it's going to be so cold right off our coastline. And we've also got big wave action as well. I want to point this out because, people get impacted by this every single year. Adults, children, and pets lose their lives every single year because of these active waves out over the Pacific Ocean here. And this is going to be active all the way on in through this weekend here, folks. So don't turn your back on the ocean. You guys know the drill. And somebody did an AI version of children and pets in the surf zone. Don't do this. This never ends up well. So anyway, don't turn your back on the ocean. And for those of you guys who get a kick out of some of these poorly designed AI graphics here, this one's kind of a funny one here. But yeah, just kind of a reminder to keep yourself out of the surf zone during the winter months. Here's the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook here. West Coast still below average and above average across California, and still includes the Pacific Northwest here as we go through March 9th. And we are starting to bump these numbers back up again here. Look at Oregon starting to get back up towards normal here, and Washington also climbing up, north Idaho panhandle there, and some of western Montana as well, in British Columbia also. So yeah, this is very beneficial for our mountain snows here, and this will continue to pile up some of the snow over the next few days. One more last look here at the infrared satellite imagery, but we'll go over everything again tomorrow morning. So just keep that in the back of your mind. If you start to see it snowing out there, check your thermometers. That's why it's good to have a weather station as well. You see those temperatures start to drop down towards 32 degrees and you see it sticking on the cement for a time, then it's going to start becoming impactful for you out there. But again, favored areas right now are along some of the coastal areas where you're closer to some of that upper level low action with a very cold air aloft, and maybe some of the Kitsap Peninsula there as well. But you can't rule out some brief accumulation across some of the Willamette Valley. Even some of the I-5 corridor has been showing to be targeted a bit here in some of the model runs also as we go on in through Friday, Saturday, Sunday morning. And again, if you bring precipitation up there and you do end up getting a little bit of that flow trying to leak out of the northeast, you can put some interesting convergence zone activity across some of northwest Washington, southwest BC. We'll continue to watch out for that also. But yeah, I'll be watching for that little system. Looks like it's going to be coming up the coast tomorrow night. We'll check that out in tomorrow's model runs Friday morning and try to see just how windy it's going to get along the immediate coastline there as well. But anyway, hope you guys are liking these videos. Click like and subscribe. We'll do this again tomorrow, and I will talk to you guys then.